Exodus chapters 11 and 12, the Passover Lamb. Now, a little bit of background, as we have already gone through those first 10 chapters or so already. The context that we see here is right in a place called the ancient Near East. That's the area around Mesopotamia. It's just a reminder, too, that it is a different culture, it is a different language, and so we do our best to understand what's going on by trying to understand how they understood. It's also good to note that this is in direct relationship to the book of the Bible that comes before it, Genesis. Genesis and Exodus have conversations with each other as this goes through. In Genesis, we see how sin has entered into the world and it spirals out of control, how death enters into the world and violence, and it raises to the point of these human empires that abuse and hurt other people. In the midst of that, right in Genesis chapter 12, we see what God's redemptive plan looks like, continuing to reach out to his people, and this time through a person named Abram, later Abraham, and how God will go and bring about his blessing and his hope into the world through this one family and then to everybody. I also want to note that Exodus is in conversation with the rest of the biblical story. In fact, the stories that we're going through are frequently echoed and referred to even in the New Testament, especially as we come up to the Easter time. We're going to see a lot of connections there. This Exodus way that continues to echo and repeat itself throughout. So now in the book of Exodus, under the empire, we see the kingdom of God against these empires of the world. Exodus is a word that just means the way out, or the road out, that we are somewhere we don't want to be and we're being called to something better. A few other terms that we've gone over before, but let's go over them again. Salvation directly means to be rescued from danger. So whenever you see the word salvation later in the Bible, we can think in our minds what it was like to be rescued in this Exodus event from this danger and enslavement. And not just that, the word redemption, which is a word we don't use outside of church all that much, is a word that literally means to be set free from slavery. Again, very directly under this oppressive empire, that's our imagination when we see the word redemption, to be freed from the empires of death and destruction. Being God's people will always mean participating as partners in God's plan for salvation and redemption of all of creation. Okay? So when we look at the Exodus story, we see these midwives. I have a hard time saying her name. Shiphrah and Puah, who go and save all of these babies. And then we see Moses' mother put Moses, this little baby, in a river and him being saved by the Egyptian princess. And then God calling Moses out of his life as a shepherd, as this flaming bush. We see that God always partners with God's people. That's the way God works. Whenever God looks to do something good in the world, it seems like God's first question is, and who can I do this with? So in partnering with Moses, Moses is sent to Pharaoh to let the people go, let God's people go. Pharaoh himself is someone who would have been thought of as a god. And he serves these other gods, but he is a god. And who are you to say, let your people go? They're my people. And we see him have this hard heart and continue to refuse, even to let the people go for just this little bit of a worshiping time out in the wilderness and coming back. So then we see God respond with these plagues. And what we often think of as plagues, the same word would mean signs and wonders. In fact, that's what they're most often called in the Bible in other languages. Signs and wonders is what it's pointed to. These revelations of who this other God is, these opportunities to turn away from the Egyptian gods and to see the one God that is above all the others and what we would understand as the one true God. And that brings us to these chapters where we start to see this Passover event. And it's almost too bad that we remember it in English as Passover, because it sounds like, as it said in that video, how things just kind of pass over, how death, this destroyer, passes over people. But really, It's not so much being removed from something hurting us as much as it's being rescued entirely. Maybe the idea of being in the flames and being rescued out of it. There will be some assumption here that since we watched that video, I'm not going to cover all of that stuff because the Bible Project, which is a free resource online, and you can find them on YouTube, they put out such fantastic resources, and all for free. So let's start looking at the text of chapters 11 and 12 together. And I will be hopping around a little bit. So right in 11:1, now the Lord had said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. And when he does, he will drive you out completely. All right, so we have this 10th plague. Again, language ends up a little bit weird here. It's actually not using the word plague in the way we would understand it. It's the Hebrew word naga, which is this idea of being like you've been hit. Kind of like a knockout blow in a boxing fight. So this last plague, this is like, there will be one more knockout blow, and that will be the end of it. Freeing people. Verses 4 through 8, kind of skipping over some of the stuff here. So Moses said to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says. About midnight I will go through Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. All these officials of yours will come to me, bowing down to me and saying, go, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. Okay, so Moses is mad. Why is he so angry? Moses is frustrated that it has taken so much for Pharaoh to finally bend. That Pharaoh continues to bring things worse and worse upon Pharaoh's people, upon Egypt, and upon the Israelites. So he is angry that it has come to this. Maybe believing in his heart, having probably known Pharaoh, the man who grows up to be Pharaoh, since childhood, at least a little bit. He's just so frustrated that it has come to this. Even after those 9 plagues, there needs to be a knockout hit. And then we see the Lord's Passover meal start to come into play. So this is an interesting time because all through the Exodus story, it's telling this narrative, a story together, and then it starts telling us about things that we should do in the future. It's talking to a future generation. It's as if there's people engaging in writing this story that are now saying, and now that's why we do this thing. The Passover meal is a single event meal that's part of the Festival of Unleavened Bread. So there's like a week-long celebration. There's a specific meal. And in that meal, they do things like eat bitter herbs. I can't say the word herbs. In the United States, they don't pronounce the letter H. Do you pronounce the H here when we say herbs? Or is it just me? Am I weird? Raise your hand if you pronounce the H. Raise your hand if you don't. Oh, it's a split. Wait, raise your hand if you don't like raising your hand. Yeah, I get it. All right, we're a split group. Well, for some of you, it's definitely herbs, and you are completely right. And for the others of you, it's herbs. Don't listen to those weirdos. They eat these bitter things. They go through this meal to remember what has occurred. And while they're doing it, they have to dress in such a way like they're ready to go. Okay. We're going to hop forward here to Exodus chapter 12 and verses 7 through 8 and 11. This is talking to the people what they're supposed to do at that time. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they will eat these lambs. So they're being told to slaughter these lambs, take out the blood. They eat this meal that includes the lamb meat. That same night, they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire, along with the bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. This is the Lord's Passover, the Lord's rescue. So we have this blood of the lamb. This is an opportunity now saying that as this event is happening, the people are staying in their houses having kind of this celebration meal of some sort, but also this ability to participate, right? Every other plague, every other sign and wonder has happened, and sometimes it has entirely only hit Egypt with most frequency and avoided the people. But here, this is an opt-in redemption. If you want to do this, here's the things you do. If you really believe this to be true, you have to put your faith into action. You have to put that blood on your doorposts. Verse 12. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals. And I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. Okay. So God is saying that this is God's judgment on Egypt. So Egypt, this empire, the most powerful empire in the world at its time, oppressing people, enslaving people, not just the Israelites, they have a whole slew of slaves. And also Egypt's gods. A reminder again that there were all these different kind of gods for all these different kind of things. And those plagues, those signs and wonders, were direct kind of pokes to show that God, the Lord, the God of Israel, that the God here is more powerful and above all these other gods. So it's this judgment on Egypt and kind of everyone participating in this different religious worship. Even to the point where, remember, Pharaoh is a god. And so Pharaoh's son will be a son of God. Israel is also telling Pharaoh here, or God is telling Pharaoh here, that Israel is his firstborn son. Way back at the beginning of Exodus, the first thing that Pharaoh is doing is he is saying there's too many people of this slave group, those Hebrews, we are going to start getting rid of them by throwing their newborn sons into a river. First, they're supposed to be killed. He kind of goes through things, and then they're going to be thrown in the river. So he has gone and attacked these firstborns. And so God is saying, this whole people is my firstborn son, the ones most important to me, the ones that I will rescue. Now, way back in chapter 4, this is what God says to Moses. When you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do, but I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my son go so he may worship me. But you refused to let him go. So I will kill your firstborn son. So God has told Pharaoh that Israel is his firstborn son, affirming right at the beginning that kind of where we end up here, God has always been aware of how Pharaoh will respond, and God is moving in this direction the whole time. Get back into Exodus 12, verse 13. The blood of the lamb they're putting on their doorposts, will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. So we see this blood on the doorposts as a sign, as an act of participation, and for them to go and to see visually, we are participating, we did this thing, and because of that, and our neighbor is doing this thing, God will pass us over. God will rescue us and not rescue those who do not participate. Verse 17 in chapter 12. It's now talking kind of to the future. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. Verse 24. So this kind of echoes through the Exodus story a few times. Remember the story. Remember who you are, whose you are, and how you were bought and freed and rescued, passed over with a price. Remember this story, have this meal, go through these actions so that you remember what it was like. And it'll say this through the Old Testament too. You are to take care of the foreigner, the outcast in your land. You are to take care of the widow and the orphan. Remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, and now you're not to treat people in that same way. Okay, now we're going to hop towards this Passover event, the actual action that occurs. Verses 29 to 33. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you've requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go. And also, bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. Pharaoh tells Moses to leave, and he asks to be blessed. So there's been a whole bunch of times where Pharaoh kept saying, I will let the people go. If this comes away, I will. And this is now the moment where he says, okay, actually go. And then there's a strange moment right at the end. Why does he ask to be blessed? Pharaoh is a god. Pharaoh thinks of himself as a god. And he has been utterly defeated by this other god. He is now someone who recognizes that he is under something far more powerful than him. He's asking to be blessed by this other God, recognizing this is humbling of himself, almost this moment of conversion. But as we know, Pharaoh's actions will show that this conversion, this change of heart, does not last very long. Verse 36. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. So that's weird. We see Israel peacefully plundering Egypt. What this means is it's as if there has been a gigantic battle, and the winning army gets to plunder, gets to take things to enrich themselves. And this happens peacefully, just going and asking and it being given. Verse 38, many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. This is a part that I feel like I frequently missed in the Exodus story. In the King James, it translates this as a mixed multitude. Israel is joined by a mixed multitude. What that means is, remember, there were other groups of people who have all been enslaved to Pharaoh. They see what's happening to this other slave group, and they say, whatever God you follow, we want that too. And they gather together and go. So Israel leaves not just as this single ethnic group, but as a group with all of these other people who are kind of being grafted in as this group that has been saved by this event. Maybe this is the first time we start to see this light to all nations happening right in this Exodus story. Because God, the Lord, the I am, the one who speaks out of this burning bush, the one who speaks to Pharaoh and says, let my people go, has entirely won the victory. Okay, now a few questions that come out of this passage. Why are there so many, as this goes on, this seems like it's happening to everyone, right? How does that seem fair? Are there, let's see how I get there. What about all those children? Does God go through and start killing children? This is a disturbing story. Let's not skip over that fact. There's something that seems to be said here where we see sin most frequently as an individualistic society, as something that I do that affects me. The Bible describes sin as participating as part of a group that hurts other people most often. God is saying there are no innocent bystanders. Even the cattle are part of this empire and somehow are participating. Remember, very early on in this story, we see Pharaoh say, to be a good Egyptian means to go and to help. We all have to do this together. Everybody, roll up your sleeves. We're all going to kill those babies. And they do. And simply then, by existing as a part of that oppressive empire, no one is considered innocent. I don't know what to do with the violence here. It is disturbing. I trust that Jesus, that God is a good shepherd, and maybe in taking those infants away, those firstborn away, maybe it's directly into God's care. I don't know. But the pain we see felt in this passage is by the people who are left behind. Why didn't we just do that thing? Why didn't we believe? The next strange thing is, what's up with all the blood on the doors? Couldn't there be another way? Maybe a way that doesn't attract flies? Maybe it's beneficial that they're going to leave this place. I don't know how you wash that out. But we're reminded, as we saw in that video from the Bible Project, that that blood as a sign of protection. If you were to have been set aside and all of those bad things, those plagues, those signs and wonders, as has been happening, have been hitting Egypt, but not your area off to the side, the little slave area, maybe you could think, well, it just happens to be location. But now, the people are invited to participate in such a way so they can see a visual representation that the blood, the life of an animal over this place shows that they are being protected, that they are being saved in this way, as they huddle together and have this meal. So why the bloody doors? Because now it's the opportunity where they can participate and see the results from their active faith. One of the other things that keeps coming up in this story is the lack of yeast. Do we have any bakers here? Probably a few. Unexpected. That's great. I look forward to the bread that you will bake me, Doug. You have been pointed out. Please use yeast. It is delicious. Yeast or leaven. That's what makes the bread rise. I don't know. I'm not a baker. I've watched the Great British Baking Show, whatever that is, but I'm not one to be able to do that. What we see here is that yeast is something, this leaven is something that holds you back. Maybe there's something to this about us becoming so comfortable that it's hard for us to get up and go. During the festival of unleavened bread, one of the things that the people participate in, the Jewish people will do, is you go and you look all through the house for any sign of any leaven. Like even to the little corners, you take everything out of every single part of your house and you kind of sweep it up. This almost exaggerated response to remember that we need to be able to move quickly when God calls us. Later into the New Testament, Jesus will say things like, beware the yeast of the Pharisees, the leaven of the Pharisees. Beware this thing that it seems so small, but once it gets in there, it rises up and it makes a huge impact. Beware what kind of things we're taking in. Make sure that we are the people of God, that we're having the yeast of Jesus that rises in us, not this other false version of religion. Okay, so what does this mean for us today as we've gone through a lot of passages? Well, first, the question, how am I living out my beliefs? It matters much less what we say what we believe versus what we do as we believe. In fact, our actions will tell the truth about what we really believe. In this passage today, you could go, if you were any of the people there at that time, you have a choice to do this weird thing with blood on your doorway or not. Choosing to do that shows that you believe in such a way that it's worth living out. In the story earlier, we see the midwives, these co-conspirators, Shiphrah and Puah, directly go against Pharaoh and save these babies. They believed that to be the right thing to do, and so they did it. Our actions that's what makes us salt of the earth. That's what makes us light to the world. Not this individualistic, just for me, private faith, but something that goes and loves our neighbors in such a way that they experience it as a blessing and as loving. The next question is kind of the opposite. How can our actions betray our beliefs? Remember in this story, Pharaoh almost comes to this point multiple times of almost seeing how things really are, of repenting. Bless me. But it won't be long after that for Pharaoh to go and to chase after the people with his army. Today, as we celebrate Palm Sunday, which all through this Holy Week, this time leading up to Easter, we see a lot of Exodus being played out again. On Palm Sunday, the people were shouting, "Save us! You're the king we've been waiting for. We're so excited." But only a few days later, some of that same crowd, those same ones that had palm branches, will be in the streets shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" On Sunday, they believed one thing, but by Friday, something entirely different. In what ways do our actions in our lives, from the little things to the big things we do, actually show something that's in contradiction to following the loving way of Jesus? What would Jesus do? How would Jesus love? Am I working against that? And in the same way that we see in this story how it seems like there's no such thing as an innocent bystander in an empire, we recognize that we are a part of an empire here. Being a part of the British Empire, being a part of almost this American empire up into us here, how are we complicit to those ways of the world that hurt our neighbors? How do we stand up and push back for the sake of our neighbors? In Matthew 16:6, that's where Jesus says, "Watch out! Beware of the leaven," that's the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, the pastors, and then like the bishops or the people who are connected as part of the state church. Very quickly, in trying to do the right things and holding on tightly to the Bible, we can get an A in biblical studies and an F in loving like Jesus. It doesn't matter how many Bible verses we have memorized. And I grew up in Awana, so I memorized a lot. Doesn't matter if what comes out of me isn't the love of Jesus in my life. Our neighbors will know the truth. And then as we look at this story, how can we be ready to move with God quickly? In some ways, not participating in the feast of unleavened bread and having that as separate from our culture, we miss this annual reminder that God calls us to move as the Spirit moves in us. That there are times when, yes, we should slow down and be careful in our decisions, but prayerfully we believe that the Holy Spirit can tug on our hearts and have us act at that time. That there are people in our neighborhood who benefit not just from our prayers, but our prayers when they are moved quickly into acts of mercy and justice. Friends, we are reminded in this passage that Jesus isn't just the Passover lamb, the thing that is sacrificed, the thing that goes and rescues us by its blood. Jesus is also the slain firstborn son. Pharaoh's son dies. Pharaoh's son is the son of a god. Jesus dies. Jesus is the Son of God in that same way. Not just being the Passover lamb, but being the one who dies the death of enemies for the sake of his enemies. For Jesus is the Passover lamb for all people, inviting everyone into the embrace of his love. Even as they kill him, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. May we follow the example of our Passover lamb.